Bertans going to fire that ball to Jonathan Simmons and no one in front of him. Leonard. Oh, Kawhi into the rim. Oh, my! Hot damn!
His mechanics are excellent. Great. Oh, my goodness, what a play.
Diving stop by Leonard.
Defended by Simmons. Is this the dagger?
When it comes to ranking and discussing the greatest players of all time, there's nobody harder to evaluate than Kawhi Leonard. At his peak, he emitted an aura around him that made people truly believe he was untouchable, the best player in basketball.
Is Kawhi the best player in the world?
Yes, he has been for a couple years now, or at least last year, and I believe he will be again this year by the time the playoffs are over.
Though not everyone agreed with that sentiment, but even so, it was obvious when you watched him at his absolute peak that few players in history could match his two-way dominance. In his prime, he striked fear in his opponents. If you saw him defending you, you're more likely to pass the ball to someone else, and not even attempt to go at him. And if you try to, or if you show any sign of weakness, he will stop you from scoring and embarrass you. At 6'7", the prototypical height of a small forward, but with a gargantuan 7'3" wingspan, which, by the way, it's the same wingspan as Giannis, Kawhi's length provided him with so many advantages that most 6'7" guys can only dream of. Yet, his prime was relatively short compared to other all-time greats, and injuries sapped him of what could have been a legendary NBA career. But just how good was he back in his best years? How's it going, folks? My name's Andy, and today let's take a look at how good Kawhi Leonard really was at his absolute peak. Hey guys, before we start, I want to give a huge shout out to my sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. It's the best time of year, the NBA season is back, and my partner, Underdog, wants to turn your takes into cash. What is Underdog, exactly? Well, millions of basketball fans around the world have played Underdog last year, and with Pick'em, you could win cash by making picks on your favorite players with a chance to win big. For example, here are some of my picks. You can create entries for multiple players at the same time. You can mix and match, even across several sports, with a chance to win 1,000 times your money, just by choosing higher or lower on each player's stat, like points, rebounds, and assists. Every NBA-only entry is profit boosted for NBA opening week, so there's no better time to get started than now. It's available in over 30 states, including California, Texas, and Florida. Underdog is the place to play, so sign up and deposit now using my special promo code ANDY to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash and a free pick. Click my link in the description below to get started. For one, it's hard to define when his peak really happened. We have the San Antonio version, the Toronto version, and the Los Angeles version. Let's start with the Spurs. Most would say, defensively, he reached his peak back in San Antonio. It was those years when the Spurs had such a competent roster around him that allowed Kawhi to put full effort into defense. His 2014 Finals MVP was on the back of his defense, and it was a great representation of how far he came as a player. It was back in these days when a slimmer, more agile Kawhi, still with a strong, sturdy frame, was the best defensive version of him we ever saw. He was a menace, he was frightening. Even if you get past him, he never dies on a play. Because of his long arms, he uses mostly his footwork to play defense. Even when it doesn't look like he's moving fast, he's still always contesting the shot, because of how he positions his body.
Oh, Kawhi Leonard, just fabulous play!
Kawhi's greatest defensive accolades were acquired back here in San Antonio. He won back-to-back Defensive Player of the Year awards at the age of 23 and 24. He made 3 straight all-defensive first teams in this span of time, too. Not only was he an absolute nightmare to score on, but this was before all his knee problems started slowing him down. Young Kawhi was at his most healthy, and he had the stamina to put 100% effort on both ends of the court. Though his offensive game was not as polished back then, he steadily got better over the years. This brings us to the 2016-17 season, his last full year in San Antonio, when he finally broke through as one of the NBA's most lethal offensive threats. This was also the first season folks truly started to wonder, is Kawhi Leonard the best player in the NBA? What separated him from other superstars, among his robotic personality or lack of enthusiasm, but his silent killer instinct in the playoffs. While most players see their numbers drop under the highest pressure, Kawhi elevates his game even further, and he's done it in almost every single postseason he's appeared in.
Difficult shot, Leonard hits.
His 2017 playoff run, however, was something to behold. A determined Kawhi Leonard rampaged through the first couple rounds of the playoffs, averaging nearly 28 points a game and took on the task of guarding the opponent's best perimeter player, while also shooting a ridiculous 53% from the field, 45% from 3, and 93% at the line. For the first time, Kawhi unveiled a new level of playmaking and passing that was seen previously as the only weakness left in his game. When the Spurs got knocked out by the Thunder in the previous playoffs, that was a main criticism of Kawhi. He would often get caught in no man's land and had trouble creating plays under pressure, not knowing what to do when he gets double teamed because he wasn't used to that. Now, a year later, Kawhi, at the age of 25, developed into a complete player from top to bottom. Everything was going swimmingly, and it looked like we'd have a Western Conference showdown between the two best teams.
It's game one of the Western Conference Finals, the Golden State Warriors and the San Antonio Spurs.
The two best teams during the regular season meeting for a right to go to the NBA Finals.
Then, it happened.
He's in pain again in front of the Spurs bench.
Under the brilliance of Kawhi Leonard, the Spurs mounted a 20-point lead by halftime. But this one injury signaled the end of their playoff run, and subsequently the end of Kawhi Leonard's time in San Antonio. After a year of sitting out due to what the Spurs called quadricep tendinopathy, there soon became real concerns that Kawhi might not ever return back to his usual self. The trade to the Raptors involved DeMar DeRozan, their homegrown franchise star, but it was risky. Kawhi clearly is the better player, but after a year of not playing, nobody was sure how his body would respond. Turns out, it responded pretty well. Kawhi's lone season in Toronto, in the eyes of many, proved to be the greatest season of his entire career. It wasn't just his incredible numbers, or his game-clinching shots, or his improbable run to the championship. It was the season where he proved once and for all he was deserving of the title of the NBA's best player. The main difference between 2019 Kawhi and 2017 Kawhi was his far more comprehensive offensive game, but at the expense of speed. After a long time rehabbing his lower body, Kawhi wasn't as quick as he used to be. On offense, he can only be described as a lethal, calculated killing machine. Someone who still looks super athletic, but prefers to use his mind and meticulous maneuvering to score in the most efficient way possible. Kawhi attempted more shots in the restricted area than any other season of his career, now taking advantage of his added bulk and his massive frame to get to the rim with ease. Averaging over 30 points a game in the playoffs en route to his second Finals MVP, this one though was much more well-deserved, as he was, without question, the best player in the playoffs and the best player in the league. One thing to note was, after leaving San Antonio, Kawhi wasn't making first-team all-defense anymore, nor was he in the running for Defensive Player of the Year anymore. When he arrived in Toronto and took on a heavier load offensively, Kawhi did not guard the opposing team's best player as often as before. Or if he did, he would guard bigger small forwards or power forwards, as opposed to running around the perimeter chasing guards. This was a strategy to help him save energy and make sure he's healthy by the end of the year. Nevertheless, when crunch time rolls around, oh, you best believe Kawhi is still gonna clamp you. In fact, the threat of Kawhi on defense might be greater than his defense itself. By simply being told to guard somebody, he eliminates them from the offense. Very few players will try to make a move if they see Kawhi guarding them. They need to call for a pick to get him switched off. The biggest travesty when it comes to NBA dynasties that should have happened look no further than Kawhi's decision to leave Toronto. After an entire year of being on an expiring contract with no public announcements about staying or leaving the Raptors, there was a sense that he was gonna leave. Despite all the fanfare, all the camaraderie, all the restaurants offering him free food if he stayed in Toronto, it was obvious Kawhi was still keeping an arm's distance, knowing that this is only a temporary stop. He wanted to go home, to go back to Los Angeles. So a lot of folks look at Kawhi's time with the Clippers and don't see it as, his prime, due to his myriad of injuries, in particular his knee condition that won't ever recover successfully, and he needs to get injections or surgery every year. It only delays the inevitable, that every time the playoffs roll around, Kawhi's knees can't hold up to the burden of an entire season. Regardless, I'd say Kawhi's offensive game took another jump in LA, as his efficiency reached a level that we never saw before. 3 straight seasons of at least 62% true shooting percentage. In his 2021 playoff run, before he tore his ACL, he was having a ludicrous postseason. Over 30 points a game while hitting 65% of his 2-point shots, which is honestly ridiculous for a wing player.
Leonard, 7 to shoot. Kawhi makes his move. Oh, wow! A major Kawhi light!
Dude was getting to his spots at will, and his offensive arsenal was more polished than it's ever been before. Don't let the playoff shortcomings fool you. His first couple years in LA were nothing short of remarkable, and it makes you wonder, did Kawhi even reach his peak yet? We thought he was on the downswing of his career, but injury after injury, he'd always bounce back and play better than before. Sadly, he'd get hurt so often, we had to start using the phrase healthy Kawhi. It's always like, oh, who's the best players in the league? It's Giannis, Jokic, maybe LeBron. Oh, and don't forget, a healthy Kawhi. Healthy Kawhi this, healthy Kawhi that. You have to use this qualifier when you mention Kawhi, because his healthy days were few and far between. His former teammate Patrick Beverley once claimed, Kawhi is the hardest worker I've seen in my life. Former teammate DeJounte Murray on the Spurs noticed, I watched him show up every single day, off days, game days, before, all of that, putting in work. Kawhi is the reason why I made that all-defensive team my second year. He might have not been the most vocal leader, but he led by example. That's the most impressive part about Kawhi's tumultuous twilight years. Injury after injury, he still works his ass off to come back to play. Even if it's for his next contract, but still. You don't make it this far as a player without his work ethic. This was a guy who came into the draft as a defensive and rebounding specialist who didn't have much of an offensive game at all. To turn into this deadly, efficient scoring machine, it's a credit to his desire to become the best. There's always what-ifs when we discuss the greatest stars in NBA history who saw their careers get cut short. Derrick Rose is a modern example. No one knows how good him or the Bulls truly could have been. Could they have competed for championships during an era of super teams? For Kawhi Leonard, he's not necessarily a huge what-if, because we saw what he was capable of. We've seen the elite level of basketball he's played. But his what-if comes down to longevity. For a 2-time champion, a 2-time Finals MVP, 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, 6-time All-NBA, 7-time All-Defense, it's quite obvious his peak was at the level amongst the greatest players in the history of the sport. Kawhi is stacked with accolades, yet his total numbers pale in comparison to the all-time greats. For example, prior to the start of the 2024-25 season, he only ranked 196th on the all-time scoring list, number 100 in all-time steals. For comparison, Devin Booker is 5 years younger than Kawhi and already scored more points than him. He simply doesn't have the cumulative numbers to back up his greatness. But mark my words, at the peak of his prime, Kawhi Leonard was arguably the best player in the league. A two-way dominance unseen from most superstars of the modern era. He truly had it all. It's a shame we'll never see how long he could have stayed at his peak. As short as it was glorious, his contemporaries know how difficult it was to play against him. he was a superstar who you feared on the court, on both ends. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts on Kawhi Leonard. Where would you rank him all time? He's most certainly the hardest modern-day superstar to evaluate. But let me know in the comments your thoughts. I hope y'all enjoyed the video, and of course, as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.